Well, welcome. We're thrilled to actually have all you folks. This is actually our fifth session in 𝐒𝐡𝐨𝐵 Connected Intelligence webinar series. For those of you that have spent time with us for the past few weeks going through each of the individual sessions, we thank you. We appreciate your participation and your questions. It's made for a great meeting overall. For those of you that are joining us today for the first time, that is fantastic. Thank you. Join us. And we encourage you to look back onto 𝐒𝐡𝐴B's website to see if you could actually look at the 4 additional sessions that have occurred. And we encourage you to join us for tomorrow's session as well. So the title of our session today is Balancing Short-Term Results and Long-Term Growth with Total Impact Assessment. This has been a challenge overall in the industry, is trying to actually balance that if you think about it from a seesaw standpoint, between short-term needs, whether it be Wall Street needs or whether it be needs for your CFO, and then the long-term growth building. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is give, for those of you that are relatively new, just a brief overview of 𝐒𝐡𝐴B. So 𝐒𝐡𝐴B is a comprehensive connected intelligence and growth planning measurement and optimization service used by Fortune 500 companies. We're designed to empower data-driven decision-making and agile marketing strategies by revolutionizing the use of causal AI and neural networks. When we look at today, we are looking at a hyper-competitive business landscape. Organizations are constantly wrestling with critical challenges. Specifically, we're looking at how to simultaneously deliver immediate performance results while nurturing sustainable long-term brand growth. Traditional methods often create silos, pitting short-term tactical wins against long-term strategic vision. But the question really is, what if there was a way to actually integrate and actually look at this in a more holistic type of approach? Our session today will explore how connected intelligence, a revolutionary framework, helps bridge the gap between immediate performance indicators and strategic brand building. Our topics that we're going to cover, and make sure that we cover these, one is the brand versus performance divide, why isolating brand and performance metrics can lead to suboptimal results, the missing link, long-term ROI visibility, how to uncover the true value of your marketing investments beyond immediate concerns. Computer froze, of course.
Yeah, good, Tom.
All righty.
We can hear you well.
No, yeah, my screen is frozen, so which is always making it a little bit challenging for me, of course. So today we have, sorry about that, folks. We actually have 2 great speakers. First off, we have Bharath Kadam. Bharath is the co-founder and also the co-founder and CEO of 𝐒𝐡𝐴B. He's been around with the inception of the company starting in 2019, and he'll be actually guiding us through this discussion. And we also have a great guest that's joining us today. We have Mayur Gupta. Mayur Gupta is currently the CMO of Kraken, which is one of the leading cryptocurrency exchanges. I advise you to spend a little bit of time with Mayur and really pay attention, because as I was looking today at Bitcoin's price and the increase that it's seen over the last years, it only was up $56,000 since the beginning of last year. So we look forward to Mayur's impact and input overall in this in our session today. Mayur has a great background overall. He's worked with some of the largest brands in terms of looking at Spotify. He's also worked with Newsweek and helping them actually work on the developing their solicitation, and then also the transition from a print to a more of a digital type of environment. Along the way, he's gathered some great accolades from the industry, and in fact, he was listed in 2021 as one of the top CMOs from Ford magazine, and we're thrilled to actually have him today. And I will turn this over to Bharath while I try to get my computer working. So Bharath, it's yours.
Hey, Thanks for all of you attending. Thanks, Mayur, for agreeing to join this conversation. Right. So the way we would do this conversation now is primarily uh, getting the perspective or a point of view from the practitioner in terms of what is the challenge that they're facing. And today's topic is very, very relevant and a burning question across the board that we hear from marketing teams, right? Uh, Compared to what we hear from analytics teams. So, Mayur, if you can just give us a sense of what is the biggest, uh, challenge the marketing teams, marketing leaders like you face in making decisions like, uh, the common ones like how do we manage short-term revenue pressure versus long-term growth pressures. Can you just give us a sense of what's the, pressure on people like you to make these decisions on ongoing basis?
Yeah, thanks, Bharat, and thanks for having me. Um, I no longer think about those as pressures only because that's just part of the responsibility that you have.
Yeah.
In most organizations, marketing is one of the biggest cost centers, or at least the biggest
Right.
spending function. And when you're spending $1 for any business, it's your accountability to bring back the ROI or an understanding of what comes back into the business. But I think it's important to take a very quick step back into how marketing's evolved in the last, I think, 15 to 18 years or so. But prior to that, for 30, 40 years, marketing was all about great creative, great storytelling, making people aware of what you had, bringing them to shelf. And, and they tried it. And oftentimes it came back because choice also was limited and touch points were limited. But, with the evolution of the ad tech, martech, data tech in the last 20 years, marketing evolved from pure storytelling engine and creative ideation and building brands to a more direct growth driving engine, that became more addressable, more attributable.
Right.
And based on the business model, if you're absolute direct to consumer, that connection, that connective tissue gets stronger and stronger, and the visibility and attribution gets better. If you're still in a CPG kind of model where there is no direct engagement with the user, then it's a little bit harder, but the responsibilities are the same. So I feel if I was summarize the biggest challenge that we have to solve as marketing or growth analytics for most businesses, it is on one hand, continue to prove the incrementality of marketing, right? What percentage of growth would not have happened in the absence of marketing, because there's a lot that could potentially be organic as well. So that's one, is purely incrementality. And then as you click down from there, it is also then understanding the different levels of marketing. We all use different names, whether that is brand and performance, upper funnel, lower funnel, whatever taxonomy you want to use, but it is proving what role does each play. Because the different types of marketing brings different depths of addressability and attribution. Right. And depending on the nature and the history of the organization and the leadership, the obsession with more clear attribution, with more clear, addressability, and the time to see the return could change. So a lot of companies are more used to instant gratification. They index more on lower funnel, and they find it hard to understand the value of brand. In some organizations, all they have is the power of the brand. So for them, it's not a question whether you should spend or not. The only question is, how is it doing, and is it really working or not? So a few different dimensions, but at the end, I'll boil it down to proving incrementality and then proving what role does each lever play and how much.
Mayur, I do have a question. Obviously, there's always a friction, and the friction exists between short-term needs, right? Not that your CFO ever asks you what's going on and what's the results overall in terms of your marketing ROI as an example, versus the long-term needs that you're looking for to build a brand over a period of time. How do you actually address for that? How do you challenge that? And also, how do you facilitate a conversation that's positive conversation with both the short-term thinkers and long-term thinkers within your organization?
Yeah, I like to rephrase, or I like to think about what you're calling friction, Tom, as a dollar distribution strategy,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, I don't want anybody to assume that here there is a set formula that is relevant for every and any business. Instead, marketing needs to be adaptable and flexible to say, at the end of the day, you have $100, you have your business outcomes. What is the right distribution strategy for that $100 to maximize impact? And as you do that, you are juggling, you juggling this short term versus long term, as because we all understand, if you're only living in the short term, which means you continue to capture as much demand as possible that's out there, there will be a point where you reach saturation cliffs, right? Where there is no more demand left for your business. And that's when you suddenly start to see growth stalling and CACs going up and unit economics turning backwards. So it's up to you, based on what growth you see exist or what demand you see exist for your business today, that should influence that distribution, whether you index more on demand creation, on demand capture, and how proactively you continue to evolve on that mix. That's the core. I feel sometimes we get stuck into preset formulas and mindset that I have to invest in brand or I have to invest only on performance. And I think
Right.
either of those extremes are harmful. It is so much dependent on your business model, your market penetration, competitive landscape, and how long you've been in there, how saturated your brand awareness is or not, and so on.
I think it's a nice way you captured it. Any marketing uh, decision is how much do we need to create incremental demand and how much we need to do to ensure that the existing intent is captured, right? That's a beautiful thing. What we've seen, Mayur, over a period of time when we speak to uh, different clients, is this: when we get into an organization, while the CMO is making the overall decision, there is supposedly a brand team with a separate budget and separate initiatives and separate metrics, so-called metrics. And then there is a performance team, which is delivering on a certain kind of metrics, right? Eventually, and those metrics are not common. So a brand team is measured on awareness, consideration, whereas the performance team is measured on how many last click conversions that are being generated, right? But all of us know that both of them kind of create or feed into each other. How do we, how do you guys address this thing in terms of this multitude of metrics that you keep getting? One is awareness metrics, second is in terms of performance metrics. How do we kind of unify them, and how do we, is there a requirement to unify them and see it as an overall metric, or they both serve different purposes? How will it help you, or what are the challenges of actually making uh, at a CMO level? How do we address those two teams who are working on two siloed metrics?
Yeah. See, if someone's sitting in performance or someone's sitting in brand, if they feel that these are siloed KPIs and the CMO has failed, right, essentially, because at the end you could argue that, look, even within brand, you have a creative team, you have a social team, you may have brand partnerships, you could have a regional marketing. So this is inevitable. There are subcomponents of every team, every organization at all levels. At the end of the day, the mindset has to be, what is the outcome versus the output of marketing? I think that's where we get to.
Yes.
There's a lot of obsession on inputs and outputs of marketing and little obsession on the outcome. At the end of the day, the outcome is growth, and then you
Correct.
go one click down. It is, how do you drive growth? There are many frameworks, but my simple framework is there are three flywheels. You grow the brand, you create new demand. You grow the user base by capturing that demand, and you grow the user value in order to retain that demand. Underneath
Right.
that, you have a set of KPIs. Some are leading, some are lagging indicators. And then you have these different flywheels that are managed by different teams. But it's this firm belief and realization that long-term sustainable growth cannot be driven by one or two flywheels. You need all three. There's no point driving awareness if you don't know how to capture it. There's no point only capturing it because there will not be any demand left after a certain point. And there's no point driving demand and capturing it if there's no retention. If the users aren't coming back, your product isn't ready. There is no point scaling marketing. What's the value? So I think that's a marketing function's job and the CMO's job to make sure they are the orchestrators. They are able to connect the different pieces to see how one contributes to the other. Now, philosophically, on ground in the real world, that's where some of the challenges come. That's where platforms like yours should come in to help out. Okay, how do you now connect these pieces? How do I know if out of the $100, if I'm spending 20 on creating new demand, I'm actually creating demand? Can I prove that? Because at the end of the day, a CFO and CEO is not going to find philosophy enough, or if you're a public company, the street is not going to live and breathe on your philosophy. They want to see quantitative impact
Outcomes
of what you're doing. They want to see the outcomes. So that's where you got to get creative and more scientific in today's world to prove causality or correlation of those flywheels, and through different types of models where you have to be able to prove the incrementality. If you're spending X on brand, this indeed is what it's driving to bring more efficiency on your performance efforts or your acquisition efforts. Over time, it's helping you improve your retention, because when your brand is stronger, at the end of the day, the customers are more forgiving. And as a brand, you are inevitably going to make a mistake. When you have that deeper connection, you are going to see that impact, that lift in lifetime value. Now, one thing I will say, besides all that creative thinking to solve this, besides all that science that you bring in internally and through partners like you all, what it also takes is internal storytelling and influence. That is one of the most undervalued traits and strengths that are needed for marketing today, because marketing is one function that has dramatically changed amongst all the functions in the last 20 years. It has flipped on its head. Product's still about building great products. Engineering is still about, driving growth, thinking about efficiency. And yes, there's a lot of change that has happened. But in terms of the purpose of the craft or how you measure it, I think marketing's changed, has taken a whole 360 curve. And a lot of that is on marketers to explain and educate within the internal customer base.
Yes, I think that's summarize it. Even whatever we experience, right? What happens is that the marketing teams are struggling with this. One, like you said, on the ground, they have these siloed metrics. Like you said, the finance and the C-suite, they don't understand these metrics of different kinds, and what they ask is for outcomes. And that's where, even though there's a lot of effect of all of these different activities, it's not being translated well to the larger organization as, hey, the contribution from marketing is this much, right? Because what they don't understand is they look for one level of short-term outcome, and they almost kind of forget what is the real long-term effect that is getting created, because marketing teams are not able to quantify it powerfully and not able to tell that story internally. And hence it impacts some of the decisions on budgeting, some of these decisions on how do we actually allocate monies, right? Because it boils down to how much can marketing help us grow if there is only one view of it, which is only a short-term view of it, which is visible. How is that going to help us get the larger picture, right? Sometimes it's possible that, like you said, you can explain intuitively that, hey, all the things that we're doing is going to help long-term effect. Like you said, philosophically, everyone agrees to it, but if you don't quantify it, we've realized that the investments on brand and long-term activities kind of get just cut, right? So where are the challenges, because everyone understands this, but what are the challenges marketing teams face to actually get this story? Is is it lost in the world of performance guys getting the MTA, brand guys using awareness metrics, and not able to have this one system to actually do it? Where does this get lost? Because we all know that it has to be unified. Why is it not done frequently than what we should expect?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. Not all marketing organizations have inbuilt depth in that level of data science and analytics just yet. Many of them do now. It's starting to become more and more table stakes to address that. I think sometimes you see, again, like I said, based on the business model, you see different types of challenges. If you're in a CPG, which is non-direct to consumer, I don't think there's any question on brand or performance. There's very little performance there. The question there is more, okay, how accurate can we get on measuring the incrementality of marketing? That's the only growth engine you have. So the questions there are very different, and traditionally that whole category, which by the way represents a lot of Fortune 100s, has always leaned on models like MMMs and so on. And then MTS came about, but with all the changes on iOS, etc., that's becoming more redundant. So you guys and more products like Data Point have come in to help them understand addressability and true attribution and so on. So that's in CPG. I think it's relatively speaking a little bit more straightforward in terms of what needs to be solved, and the conundrum is less complex. I think in product-led direct-to-consumer businesses, that's where the challenge becomes a little bit more multifaceted. So on one hand, you have to address and prove attribution from top of funnel to lower funnel, because you're spinning all those flywheels. And then two, because a lot of those product-led companies also have very strong organic growth. There is product-led growth too. So you're also being challenged, rightly so, on proving the incrementality of marketing, right? Because the word of mouth is very strong. In many cases, you have virality and network effects baked into product. So at the end, it all boils down to, how does a marketing function distill signal from noise? What platforms are we using? What do we determine are the right KPIs? How do we get creative in terms of creating short-term proxy KPIs? So if your organization doesn't have the mindset to wait for 3 months to know what did, let's say X million dollars on the brand investment, what is that exactly doing? How do you identify some short-term proxies? For example, get creative with looking at share of search. Look at app store behavior. Look at direct traffic. If your brand is getting stronger, I think it's fair to assume that people coming directly to you, should be expected to go higher versus purely coming transactionally through a search engine. So there are some interesting short-term proxies that are good leading indicators that something's happening. And then, at Kraken, we invest a lot of effort on that and MMM, and we do a lot of match market tests. So you turn some things off, you keep all other things static as much as possible, and you prove incrementality. You do control group studies. We obviously run brand trackers to see, is the perception about who we are, is that evolving? So you do all of that. I'm not saying all of that is still enough. You still have to connect all the pieces, still have to keep fighting and keep having internal discussion and dialogue. But at the end, look, what I always say, Bharat, is at the end of the day, the conversation should begin not based on brand versus performance. It should begin from, this is what marketing is spending. This is the investment. Here is a return. Most cases, if that unit economic is healthy, what I mean by that is cost to bring somebody, payback period, apply the gross margin, and if that is net positive, the challenges and the conundrum to solve what's underneath is relatively lower. But if that unit economics is not strong, then it's inevitable that you have to open up, peel the onions off, and see where is the investment going, and is it really working in every place?
Got it. Yeah, got it. Just give me a second. Something is My system is again.
Hi, Mayur. I do have some questions specifically, and you have a unique background coming from an engineering side, right? So you actually have the ability to really understand a lot of the nuts and bolts and also the dynamics associated with data. How would you say that the role of the CMO in this situation has evolved over time, right? We've had the creatives that had led the industry for quite some time, and now we have the analytic folks that are coming in here. How has that changed? And how do you foresee that changing further into the future?
It has changed as a result of changes in the customer expectations and the boundaries of the customer experience. So it has all been in response to that. And that's changed because of the proliferation of all the technology and the world we live in, which is inherently digital. So that's fundamentally redefined how we run business, how we build brands, the levers and the tools. I don't think the foundations of marketing really has changed. It is still about the same kind of values, show up when you said you will show up, be honest, be authentic. Don't fake shit. If you made a promise, make sure your product delivers it. Like, these are things that our parents taught us as being good humans. Those are the same principles for good marketing as well. Yeah, there's some fancy terminologies. I never studied marketing, so I don't know. But I do know there are 4 A's, 4 P's, X, C's, Y, something else. But it boils down to that. That hasn't changed. What's changed is the levers, the tools, the technologies you use, how addressable things are, the touch points where people engage, the choices that the customers have, which means it's redefined loyalty, right? Because back in the day, loyalty was all about a hostage situation, right? So because it was so hard to move from place one to place two, having access was hard, having choice was hard, but none of that exists now. It's ubiquitous. Like, you can move from one brand to the other. There's very little friction. You can move it as and when you want. You're not waiting for a Christmas campaign. So all of that has fundamentally changed the expectations from marketing, the outcomes of marketing, how success from marketing is defined, which means the skill set needed to be a leader, to be a marketer, to be a CMO has also evolved, and rightly so, right? So whether you come from creative or analytics or engineering or brand building, whether you come from the client side or the agency side, at the end of the day, yes, you'll always go deep in one area or the other, but you've got to go broad. It's more like a T-shaped. And I think that applies to every single skill sets too. Like, marketers have to understand data. They have to understand first principles of finance. Otherwise, you're not held accountable. Otherwise, you can't really deliver your economics. You got to understand the nuances of technology, because marketing and tech is inseparable, right? And it's inbuilt. And with AI and a lot more agility and velocity coming into marketing and a lot more potential efficiency gains, marketers have to stay on top of that to leverage it in order to be competitive. So I think about all these functions, not just marketing in general, is very similar to what I used to think about doctors and the healthcare space, where there's constantly new viruses. So I used to see so many medical professionals constantly reading and studying to catch up on new viruses and new vaccines. I think we live in a world where each one of us have to stay on top. It's constantly evolving, so you got to keep amping up your skill set and connect many more dots.
That's great. Because it seems to be an evolving and a different type of skill set that's being utilized today, as opposed to it has been, say, like 10 years ago. And I think that has to do with a combination of a few things. One is there's a higher level of visibility in the position, and there's a lot more demand from upper management to make sure that each dollar that's being spent is being spent appropriately, and not more of a gut feel type of approach. And secondly, the ability to have more data available to you to help you make those decisions in a much more proficient fashion is probably up the game significantly in terms of the skill sets that are associated with the CMOs. When we think about the last part that I just mentioned in terms of data, what are some of that you would think are some of the shortfalls in some of the data areas that you would feel that would be extremely important? And obviously one of them perhaps being long-term ROI and long-term brand equity and so forth. What are some of those areas that you feel as though there's opportunities for new data sources to be utilized or new data to be executed and actually integrated into your modeling approach?
Yeah, I think, look, there is so many sources of data now. There are signals being captured everywhere, online, offline. If offline is hard, there is some other third-party platform that is connecting those dots, trying to connect identity between absolutely addressable data and under-addressable data and so on. So I don't think there is a dearth of data. Yes, there is a dearth of data integrity. So you got to keep focusing on that. There's a lot of focus oftentimes on analysis and AI and ML models, but there is very little focus on integrity. But if it's garbage data, it doesn't matter how great the model is, it's going to create garbage outcomes. So that's like, again, first principles, right? It's foundational. In terms of what I would love to see keep happening is for more and more models that prove incrementality of marketing to be faster and continue to build more and more trust. Like I think because all these models are so complex, and it's not easy to understand because it's code written, right? It's behind the scenes, and you're trusting one black box, or you're trying to differentiate one black box from another black box. The key is then how are you able to bring the feedback loop and test that outcome, test that recommendation to build more trust, to build more proof point. I think that supply chain of insight to follow-up experiment to proving the insight and proving the model, I think that's key in order to build trust within the organization, along with the finance and the FP&A teams and your own data org. So that's what I would say. I think there is enough products, and of course you guys are doing something in a very unique way that you guys talk about often. There are other competitive products that are solving in their own unique way. So I think there is now a category of attribution, measurement, analytics platforms that are solving these needs. We have to make sure that we are able to run through the supply chain of that execution to build internal credibility and internal trust. That yes, when the model is saying this is what your brand investment is driving, see, we have proven it. It is indeed driving that, and here is how we've proven it. Or if this is the cross-channel attribution, and you thought it was all paid search, in fact, branded paid search, it's not true. This is how we've proven it. I think that's the part where we have to get more nimble, more agile, if we have to break through the internal log channel.
That's a great point, because in essence, what you're saying is you have a fire hose worth of data that's being thrust at you. You need to make sure that you take the data that has the highest level of quality, bring that into your model so that you're actually making decisions based upon a good foundational base. And that's garbage in, garbage out when you're dealing with this. So it must be tough to actually be able to assess that and be able to evaluate those different platforms. The one last question that I have for you is, when you're looking at these allocations, and obviously we wish that we had infinite dollars to be able to market but the reality of today is, we've had inflation and so forth, which have kind of impacted overall, and we've had some companies that have to cut back. How do you work in an environment such as that, where you have certain fairly aggressive goals, yet you're working in an environment where you may be getting cutbacks? the reality of the business is, when we're looking to cut expenses, we may be looking at the marketing side. How are you balancing that equation, especially both in the short and also the long term, of course?
Yeah, one, I don't think I wish I have infinite dollars to spend on marketing, because that will also mean infinite responsibility that will be hard to prove right. And marketing absolutely has a point of diminishing return, which is also something that we all have to keep assessing, beyond which any more investment isn't going to bring you net new growth. But I would think about that question, Tom, slightly differently, which is, I don't think marketing has to be a recipient of those decisions or a victim of those decisions. I think you have to be in the game. You have to be in the decision-making engine. And if you're contributing to growth, and you absolutely are, and I think that mindset has to lead to a common set of outcomes and decisions, where marketing should be able to say, look, let's pull back. Market isn't strong right now. Any more marketing isn't going to drive more growth. Or, hey, let's pull back. We're not seeing enough stickiness and retention in our product. Let's first improve that. Let's first optimize it. And then let's come back and then scale and bring more people into the ecosystem, who will derive more value. And I feel that's the way. I feel very strongly that oftentimes marketing has had a tendency to drift on its own island, away from the mainland. And it translates into our own language that nobody else understands. It translates into our own outcomes that don't align with the outcomes of the mainland. And the intentions have always been to influence everybody else to be like us, versus, no, we have to evolve and adapt and become like everybody else. And sometimes, many times I say that means, as marketers, before you obsess with the brand, obsess with the core product that you're selling. Are you the biggest users of those product, of that product, of the category? And before you obsess with the brand, obsess with data, obsess with the business, because that's the ask. I think that's where the disconnect happens with most marketing functions, when everybody else in the organization feels, I don't know what the heck these people are doing. I don't know what they're smoking. I don't understand anything they're saying, or the KPIs here. How do they even tie to the rest of the business? I think that's where you got to fix. Everything else then becomes mechanics, because then you are on the table trying to figure out what changes do we need to make, like everybody else.
When you think about, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I think what Mayur said is the real way of how marketing should transition, right? We should actually have marketing should have the growth accountability, and once they are on the table, talking the same language as business outcomes, right? And that is when the real power of marketing actually happens, rather than, like exactly said, work in a silo. Hey, we are doing our best, we are trying to get it, but like you said, the other side of the organization is not seeing the outcomes, right? One of the things that we kind of did to kind of address this, right, is a thing where, we call it the, growth planning hub, which kind of helps marketing teams to be at the table, right? Where you actually have the stake on how do we help, how are you helping, how are we as marketers helping you grow, right? And also, how can we help you solve this problem in a one agile manner? Once we have this mindset where we're all connecting it to the growth, by whatever we're doing, we can be doing brand, we can be doing performance, long-term impact, all other external factors. But if we are able to tell the rest of the company, hey, this is our growth contribution, and this is what we can do, and this is how we will impact you in the same language as business, right? That's when the real impact of marketing will happen across the board, and we will have a seat on the table saying that this is what we're doing, right? And that's where, like how Mayur is saying, it's not about only brand, it is also about how can we link that brand work that we're doing, performance work that we're doing to the growth or the business outcomes is when the real impact happens. And thanks to causal AI, we are now able to actually establish this very, very strongly, the connection between different activities of brand and doing it with connecting with the outcomes. Earlier, the issue was about agility. Issue is about how can we prove it in a shorter time? How can we give the output to business in a shorter time? Now, when we have the causal AI system, which can learn as fast as the present times, you can actually deliver that in a very, very continuous manner so that the marketing teams can make those decisions on growth in a very powerful manner, right? So that's how the real power of AI actually brings to the marketing teams, which is decision making on growth, but not just decision making on the growth, but also helps you to allocate better, get the budgets better, demand budgets from the marketing from the organization better, because now we can prove the contribution and incrementality that we're delivering to the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah. So when we look at this, Bharath, just looking at this, so I think Mayur hit the nail on the head. Is you have separate islands that you're dealing with, and it's the job of the CMO and also the marketing team to make sure that you're actually bringing those silos together. So from this standpoint, are you saying that the connected growth planning can actually bring those individual silos together? So we're looking at a single version of the truth. Did I capture that correctly?
Absolutely. You're getting one total, whatever is a dollar, what is the incremental sale we're generating, rather than telling about, hey, I have so many conversions, my awareness has improved, my consideration has improved, I have such a long-term effect because of a sponsorship. It doesn't matter. These are all like how Mayur said, is very much within marketing islands, metrics, right? Once we have the larger, all of it converted into the outcome conversation, we're all in the same place, right? The finance understands outcomes, you understand outcomes, you're talking about outcomes, then it's very clear.
Mm. The industry has kind of evolved somewhat, having two different frameworks, right? So you have MTA, and then you have traditional market mix modeling. And there's difficulty, of course, between that situation, because you do have two KPIs that may come out, and you do have differing results. How do you actually bridge that gap and being able to bring the best of what MTA does, which is speed and granularity, and then also market mix modeling, which is a more of a strategic type of approach?
Yeah, so that's what causal AI can help you, right? It cannot be two siloed systems. The power of causal AI is actually, if you look at it, to be able to measure everything together, understanding business that there is a short-term impact and then there's a long-term impact, but eventually creating one total impact, right? So the systems are now capable, thanks to causal AI and deep neural networks, you are not able to understand a very granular view of what is happening on the ground to a long-term view of what is impacting the business brand and hence what is impacting business. That's what the new age causal AI systems can help you to get one real total impact, right? So I don't see, you can have two systems running and creating, again, more silos within the marketing organization. It is a unified view of what is the impact of different activities connected to the outcomes, right? That's the most important thing. Once you have that, we're all on one page. We're all in one room talking to the same thing, right? That's what the systems can do and help us build.
Got it. When you look at short and long-term ROI, right? Let's just use that as kind of our proxy here. Some clients utilize a static proxy, right? that they may have received from some of the other vendors, right, to 70/30, and they utilize that ubiquitously across all the different media-related components of their marketing plan. What does Data.Poem do differently in that situation to be able to capture the differences between short and long term across individual, say, media elements or campaigns or whatever the case may be?
Right. So one of the important things that we have to understand that every campaign activity has its own objective and what it can deliver, right? You cannot expect a branding campaign to be same as a channel partner campaign, to be same as a F1 campaign or a Super Bowl that you do, right? Each campaign has a different kind of a short-term effect and a long-term effect. Unless you measure it independently, you are not really capturing the total ROI, right? So it's very important that we actually measure the true impact of all the activities and not use some heuristic or not a multiplier effect at a brand level. It doesn't work like that. It has to measure at an individual level, individual activity level, so that the true ROI of each of these activities can come together properly.
Got it. What in a situation where you're utilizing a static distribution, say 70/30 or what have you on that situation, when you're going into an optimization, what impact can that have? And then as opposed to the impact that having the long term and short term at more of a granular basis, how does that impact, you know, the business growth planning process and the optimization process?
The same thing, right? If you have one single metric as a single multiplier, it's as good as having optimizing one short-term metric, right? Because multiplier is just a multiplier. So just take an example, in this case, Super Bowl or F1 sponsorship here, right? Imagine if you just put a multiplier across all of these metrics, right? The budget allocation per Super Bowl would drop because you are not really giving the value of the long-term impact it is creating on the business, right? And hence, the next question that comes is, hey, it's not delivering as impactful as brand campaign, because brand campaigns or performance campaigns are relatively cheaper to build compared to a Super Bowl or a F1 sponsorship, right? And hence, what happens is, hey, if it's not working, then let's drop the investment, right? So that's the biggest challenge, right? Where you are not able to allocate monies properly to the brand. And Mayur would, understand this, and his challenge and fight would be actually this to kind of explain this value and outcomes to the brand, to the business teams, or to the finance teams and the CEOs, saying that, hey, this is the kind of work that we're doing, which actually delivers this, and this is the result of outcomes that you are going to generate, right? And hence the allocation of budgets for all these activities in a big way.
Well, we're coming up on time right here. I do have some questions from the group. So let me just kind of jump right in here on some specific questions. And one of the questions that we received, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read here on this screen right here for a sec, is Mayur, when you're evaluating your models and the potential impact of these models, you mentioned one thing about doing testing and learning and doing comparatives so that the models actually are aligning with some of the testing that you're doing. What other mechanisms are you utilizing to ensure that the model that you're using is producing, reliable results that your decisioning on is going to be, that much better overall?
So the question is, how do I know the model is directionally accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I don't until I test it, right? So I think the way I would approach it is run a model, let the model come up with an output, but expect my team to then come up with a plan that says, okay, how am I going to test the output of the model, in a small percentage of a market, without knowing if it's going to work or not, but create an experimentation plan that shows we're going to expose X% of your market to the output of the model, and compare that with everything else, so like a control group. See if you have enough stat-sig difference between the model's output execution and what you were doing, like you were doing before. And that's the only way you build trust in the model. Like practically speaking, for instance, if you're using an output from 𝐷ATA-Poem that says, hey, this is the role that paid social is playing for you, versus what your last touch model tells you, which likely is giving all the credit to paid search, which is very understandable. You pick a market, and you change your media strategy. You shift the dollars, obviously, given within boundaries, and do you see better result? And you prove that, and that's the way you build confidence in the model.
So Tom, this is very important, right? Any intelligence system works only when with the trust of the decision maker on the system, right? So what happens is that the predictive models right now, or prescriptive models that we'll have right now, actually predict a certain outcome, test it out, and then when the prediction comes very close to 90 to 95% accuracy, is when the decision maker starts trusting the model, right? It has to be actionable. It has to have a very high degree of predictable accuracy. Then only there is any sense of intelligence. If you don't have that, it's as good as having any insight, right? It's of no use.
Mayur, there was one question about, and you mentioned that when you look at some of the traditional approaches to capturing both short and long term, and also market mix modeling, the data doesn't necessarily come out in a very fast, doesn't really come out very fast overall. So you may get a market mix model that comes out once, maybe twice a year, and there's a lag associated with it. How important is it to have speed of the data? And I'm assuming quality, right? So don't say speed with bad data. Of course, I agree with you 100%, but assume for a second that the data is a quality data set coming out for you to make decisions on. How important is that for you?
It's extremely critical. I think that the times of 1 or 2 MMM studies in a year is gone. If you have that, if you're able to do that, then that's a luxurious life. Keep living it. It's great. But you are very blessed. I can tell you that 90% plus organizations or marketing functions would not have that luxury. You almost need to be assessing that on a monthly basis, and including 𝐷ATA-Poem. I know for a fact that they would run these studies, monthly and latest quarterly, for you to be able to make faster decisions. On top of what I had shared earlier, get creative with your proxy KPIs, get early signals, some leading indicators. But yes, I don't think that most businesses today have 6 months to wait to make an investment and then figure out what happened.
Yeah, Tom, you would realize we were in that ARF conference where we're looking at the trends and what's happening. I think like what Mayur said is no longer a upcoming trend. It is an established thing that we are seeing that marketers want a very agile monthly. In some business models like D2C models, they are looking at weekly. So it's speed of data coming is must, intelligence coming is must, and with higher predictive accuracy is must, right? Once those two things are there, that's what everyone wants. If anyone who is not doing it, they're all wanting to do it. And trust me, when we do this webinar next year, right, I think the whole world would have moved into almost like, in a transition phase to move into a monthly paradigm. That much is a very, very clear trend that we're seeing across the board.
Ralph,
because it's not, yeah.
You just stole my last question. I was going to ask you, we always want to get an idea of, soothsayers and figure out what's going to happen 3 to 5 years down the pike. Things are moving so fast in our business that it's even hard to predict, a year out. But let's put our blinders on for a second and assume for a second that we can actually do that prediction for a year. Where do you see the business that we're in? And Mayur, I'm talking to you as well. Where do you see where do you see the business headed? And I'm talking about metrics and analytics and so forth, right, within the next year. And in that situation, where would you want it to be also? So there's kind of a two-pronged question. It's where do you see it going, but where would you like it to be able to help you and Mayur, for your sake, to make better decisions?
I mean, there are two axes on which we will keep getting better, Tom, whichever way you cut it. One is latency, so the speed at which you get an insight, and second is quality and depth, and the quality and depth of that insight. What at the end of the day, it all boils down to, how do I maximize the impact of every single dollar that marketing spends, period, right? And there are these axes on which there is efficiency gains. The faster we get that insight, the more ability do you have to make pivots, the more accurate these insights are and more in-depth, where attribution across touch points, attribution across different types of work gives you a better and faster understanding of where to pull, where to push. So I think it all comes down to that.
Yeah, from the way I see things happening and evolving, I see at a very meta level, the big thing is about moving from a descriptive, insight-driven world to actually actionable, prescriptive world, where like how Mayur was mentioning, the accuracy of insight, the velocity of that insight, and hence using that to actually determine outcomes and growth of that, growth in terms of outcomes growth, is where I see a system evolving, where the intelligence systems will evolve into more an agile, unified, outcome-based measurement systems, and the world will move into that direction, right? And like any phenomenon, there will be people like Mayur who will be up very forefront of that phenomenon, and then there will be people who will be moving in that direction. But that's the clear direction that is already set, which is a great thing for marketing as a function, because I think we all have to start talking outcome language and not marketing metrics language anymore.
Agreed. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Mayur, thank you. I know we had a few hiccups, technically speaking here. Appreciate everyone's patience as we were working our way through them. I hope you enjoyed this session. Please feel free to send us any additional questions. We're more than happy to follow up with you on any questions that you may have. Mayur, once again, thank you so much. It's been fantastic having you here. Hopefully, we'll be able to have the opportunity to speak to you once again down the pike. As I mentioned, based upon the success that we've had thus far with these webinars, and specifically in the connected intelligence world, we're looking to do these more often. So hopefully we can actually count on you to join us, and hopefully we won't have a few hiccups along the way, and we can do a better job for you. But we appreciate it, and thank you so much. We look forward to most of the folks here joining us tomorrow for our next session. And again, thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Mayur. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all joining the session.